Hi, everybody. Peggy McGuire here with English 104 Technical Writing, and today's topic is teamwork. There's a lot of writing that you are going to be doing in this class and also in the world of work and technical business in which you are going to have to work with other people to produce written documents. So we focus a good deal on group writing in this class. So today we're going to look at the way a group effort becomes a technically effective writing production. And that's where we go. So, let's start with some general truths about teamwork. Before we actually talk about writing as a team, I want to talk about functioning as a team. And these are just some very broad but very tried and true concepts. First of all, in order for a team to work, every member of that team needs to be committed to cooperating with the other members. So there really has to be a shared understanding that we will do a better job if we cooperate with each other, and then a shared acting on that understanding. So if you go into a group not really caring about the outcome, not really caring about the other people you're working with, you are pretty much dooming yourself to failure in group activities. So it's critically important, even if you don't particularly like writing or working in a team, and there are lots of people who don't. There are lots of people who would prefer, for various reasons, to work independently. Um, that's not surprising, but it also simply does not matter when your boss asks you to do a project with other employees. Your preference for individual work is not the issue. So there are going to be times when you have to do it. Hopefully you'll learn to love it because it can be very, very powerful if these guidelines are followed. The first one being each person in that group is going to decide that for this task, in order to be successful, I am going to get along with and cooperate with the other members in my group. And if I can do that, I've got a good leg up on the project. So, having said that, the next thing that's very important is that you have a structure for your team that everybody understands and can easily identify. So, in other words, is there a leader of this team? If so, who is it? What does leadership mean for us in this team? What is the leader expected to do? And believe me, the leader is not expected to do all the work. The leader in a team that's most effective is really coordinating the activities of all the members of the team. So, is there such a person? If so, who is that person? Or do we need different leaders for different kinds of work to be done? Do we need somebody who's really good at keeping us on time and on task? Well, let's make that person the timekeeper. Is there somebody who's really good at getting everybody to contribute his or her 2 cents? Well, then that person can facilitate the discussion of the group. Is there a person who is really good at taking notes? That person records the activities of the group. So, whatever it is, however you decide, it's very important that each member of your team knows what that structure is, who's doing what, and how we are working together. So, it's just very important from the early on that each member of the team make sure that you understand and that you know that everybody has a common shared understanding of the structure of the group. All right? So, next point. A good group has a clearly defined goal. And once again, this shared understanding, I can't say that. I can't use that term often enough. Making sure that everybody in the group has the same understanding, in this case, of what the goal of the group is. What do we need to accomplish together? I would say write it down. The first time you get together, ask the question, what is it that we are supposed to accomplish? And make sure that everybody says what she or he thinks you're supposed to accomplish, and make sure it's the same thing, right? So you don't have people working at cross purposes. You want to make sure that everybody has a clear, shared understanding of what we are supposed to accomplish in this group, or for this class, for this assignment, for this project that the supervisor just asked us to do. What is our goal? What do we want to accomplish? All right? And then last but absolutely not least, because this really takes everything else into consideration, is clear communication within and among the members of the group. How do we make sure that we have that shared understanding that I'm talking about? How do we make sure that everybody feels comfortable adding their contribution to the group? How do we make sure that everybody understood what someone just said? How do we make sure everybody understands the task that they've been asked to do? All of those things are about speaking and listening and thinking and then listening some more and then speaking and then listening some more. That's what communication is. That constant interplay of thinking, listening, and speaking, and making sure that everyone in the group feels able to do all three of those things for the greater good of the goal of the group. So, how do we make sure that kind of communication is happening? We make a plan if we need to. We write it down again, and everybody looks at it. We make a plan. How are we going to talk to each other? How often are we going to talk to each other? When are we going to talk to each other? In an online or a blended class, such as this one is, it's going to be especially important since you only see each other for a brief time each week. Your communication online or by phone or in however you decide to do it, in meetings outside of this class, but you are going to need to be very clear about how we make sure that we communicate with each other and, have regular times to check in, have someone always monitoring discussion boards. Again, making sure everybody knows what his or her role is in assuring good, clear communication is going to help tremendously in making your group effort a greater success. So please, I know that these are very general guidelines, but they're all absolutely critical to what your experience is going to be like over the next several weeks working in this class, very often with teams. All right, so it's to your advantage to really think through how to follow these guidelines. All right, so now that we've gotten that sort of general stuff out of the way, let's talk about managing team writing projects in particular. And there are really two ways that I think about team writing projects. The first one being, how do we make sure that we can plan and produce the document that we're being asked to plan and produce? So I want to look at that piece of it first. But then the other really critical piece of teamwork is once we have a document, a first draft of a document, how do we revise it together to make it the strongest possible document it can be? So let's talk about the planning and producing first, and then we'll talk about the revising. So, once again, we start by looking at our team structure. So, very early on, you need to decide who that team leader is going to be. And once again, not only is it important to decide who, but it's also to be very clear about what the role of the leader is, what the leader is going to do. And remembering that the leader is not the person who does all the work. The leader is the person who coordinates the work, who makes sure that everybody has a voice, and makes sure that everybody has a role, and makes sure that if there's a problem, that it gets addressed. Those are the kinds of things that a good team leader does, not actually do the work him or herself. All right? So, one of the first things the team leader is going to do is going to be to lead the group in a discussion about what our goal is. Remember how important it is to be clear about what the project goal is? Well, here's a job for the team leader, is to say, okay, let's talk about this together. What is it that we need to accomplish? Let's make sure that we're all on the same page about what we think we're supposed to accomplish. And then if we're not on the same page, let's make sure we get ourselves on the same page. So you certainly want to have that conversation almost immediately. All right? So based on that conversation, if this is what we're supposed to accomplish, then the next question for the group to decide on is what kind of document we need to write in order to accomplish the goal. All right? Are we being asked to do a memo? Are we being asked to do a full-fledged technical report? Or something in between? What document is going to meet the goal? All right? Then, very quickly, dividing up tasks. Who is going to be responsible to do what? And that is where it's so important for each member to be able to say out loud, here's what I'm good at. Or here's what I don't really feel very comfortable doing. Or here's what I really hate doing. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to need to do it with somebody else. It's really, you're just going to get so much better production out of a group if people get to think about what they're good at. And once you get to know each other a little better, you'll start sensing what other people are good at. So it won't always be so necessary for me to say, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. Because I'm going to notice the person who is really good at sort of like listening to people and then summarizing what they just said. That's a skill, so if somebody's good at that, you want that person to play that role. But more sort of writing related things. And again, I think as you get to know each other better, you'll get to know more about each other's writing also. So who's good, who is good at wordsmithing versus who's good at just like getting stuff out on paper? Who is really good at capturing details? Who's really good at summarizing information? What kind of writing do you feel most comfortable with? So that's the kind of writing you can do. But maybe somebody is especially good at coming up with visuals for graphic design as part of a writing project. Well, let that person focus on the visuals. It's really about making sure you've got your best people doing what they feel like they can do best so that the whole has everything it needs. Okay? So divvy up responsibilities early on. You can always change if as time goes on you realize that maybe someone else would be better at doing something else. You can always change it, but get that going early. Guidelines that I've talked about and really made sure that you have a good clear sense of how this group is going to function. Well, write it down. Write down the guidelines that you decided on and give every member of the team a copy. So, again, clarity of communication. There's no question. We all agreed to these guidelines. Right? They're right in front of me on this piece of paper or on my computer screen. Alright, so I can't say I didn't agree to that or I never heard about that because we wrote it down when we said it, and we put it out so everybody has it. Shared understanding. Okay? And when someone asks you to do a task, to engage in a project, you want to be regularly letting that person know how you're doing. Alright, we're actually going to talk about progress reports later on in the class, and you will need to write one as you're doing your own major research project for this class. But generally speaking, whenever somebody gives you a project that's more than like have it done by today, that they're going to want you to check in with them to make sure that you're on track. So don't wait to be asked. Submit regular progress reports to whoever asks you to do the work. And that can raise issues as well as saying, we're on track. All right? Because if you raise issues and you talk about how you're going about resolving them, that's going to increase your credibility with the person who asked you to do the work. That you're willing to be honest if there is a bump in the road, but not only are you honest, you're also proactive in saying, okay, and this is how we're going to resolve this issue. So that gains respect for you in the real world. And finally, listen, 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 listen. Before you talk, listen. Think, listen. If for some of us who love to talk, sometimes you really need something extremely mechanical, like literally like biting down on your tongue for 5 seconds before saying anything, giving yourself a chance to listen before you talk. It just makes communication so much more possible, so much more effective. So listen before talking. Okay? Listen, think, talk. Listen, think, talk. Alright? Now, I said that I was going to look at this in 2 chunks. The first one being, like, how do we actually plan and develop a written document as a team? Now, what happens when we're ready to revise and make it the best possible document it can be? That's where we use the process that you're probably familiar with in some form that we call peer review and peer editing. Basically, that's absolutely what you're doing in a team. Is you are peers and you are producing a document together, and you need to be able to talk to each other about its strengths as well as its weaknesses. Okay? So, some guidelines for peer review of your writing project as a team. First of all, just a good idea, always read through an entire piece before you're ready to talk about it. Again, bite down on your tongue. Don't talk until you've gotten through the whole piece once. Alright? Then, when you're ready to talk, you're going to be talking about 2 separate but very important and related issues. Start by commenting on the content, on the big picture, on what this is supposed to be about, right? Which is really what the goal goes back to. What's the goal? What are you trying to accomplish? So how well does this piece of writing accomplish what you wanted to accomplish in terms of its content and its organization? Does it flow together, and does it communicate what we want it to communicate? So you want to start by commenting there. Then you can talk about correctness. Alright? And correctness is very important. Let's not forget. You never, ever, ever hand in a piece of work that hasn't been corrected and is not clean. So I'm not saying correctness is not important, but start with the content and then go to the correctness. Okay? Always be diplomatic but honest. It does no one any good for you to not be honest. And it is difficult sometimes to honestly say things that are not positive. I hesitate to use the word critical because that seems to make people very nervous. But in fact, we are talking about critical reading of another person's writing. And critical reading meaning you are looking at it for both strengths and challenges. Alright? And when it comes to having to talk about weakness, you have to do it, otherwise you're not doing anybody any good. But you can do it in a diplomatic way. You can be nice about it. You can be clear but respectful when you talk about how you think that the writing might be strengthened. Because that's what our shared goal is, to hand in the strongest piece of writing we can. So, in the spirit of all of us being committed to this shared goal, here is where I think that we might strengthen this piece. Right? That's a respectful way to make critical comments about writing. All right? And you do want to comment on strengths as well as weaknesses. I always like to start with strengths. I always like to, I guess it was my mother telling me, if you can't say something nice, start with something positive. If you can find it. If you can find something that you feel like is a strength of the piece of writing, say so. And then go ahead and say, and here's where I feel like it could be strengthened more. All right? Very important. If you say something doesn't work, say why it doesn't work. Explain why you think the change needs to be made. And once you say why, be ready with a specific recommendation for what, for how to do it. What might be a different way of saying this that would be clearer? What might be a different way of structuring the sentence that would be less awkward and more fluent? What would be a better word to get really specific, especially in technical communication? You need the right words. You need the words. Remember, we said earlier, you need just the fewest, most powerful, most clear words in technical communication. So, if I'm saying this sounds vague, I don't really understand what you're saying here, be ready also to say this might be better. Okay?